name is Lekha Surasani. I'm a senior software engineer at Adpipe. Adpipe is a relatively new company. I think in total, we've been around for a bit under 2 years. I joined in September 2023. We have a total of about 25 employees in all. And so today I want to tell you a little bit about our company, yes, but mostly how we've been using LiveView. Some more information about me. I have about 6 years of experience in total. I've worked at companies ranging from 10 people to all the way to about 800. And I've been personally using Elixir since 2020. In my previous job, we used Elixir mostly for backend services, but this is going to be the first time that I have used Elixir as both, a front end and back end thing. So LiveView has been really interesting to work with over the last 8 months, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. So it is important to kind of understand the context of the situation. So I just want to tell you a little bit about how our hiring history and get into our tech stack a little bit before I actually dive into what we think makes LiveView so great. So our team, as you can see, kind of grew pretty quickly in 2023 after ending 2022 with only a UI engineer and a full stack engineer who was also the founding engineer. We hired 4 more and full stack engineers by the end of 2023, myself included. And in the last couple of months, we've added an additional hybrid product manager UI and somebody who is also a manual QA hybrid with full stack. So as you can see, lots of hybrid positions. Our head of engineering has also turned into our engineering manager, so he has not necessarily coded as much in the past year, but as time allows, he does still contribute. So overall still 4 full-time full stack engineers, 1 UI engineer, and we've been able to keep the team pretty small in our opinion. And I'll get into why a little bit later, but this is the stack that we currently use. I just pulled the screenshot off of GitHub, off of our main repository. As you can see, it is mostly Elixir. We have a bit of JavaScript. There's a portion of the application that lets you edit photos and videos. So you can layer different text or graphics or crop things. And that, of course, is all JavaScript. So the vast majority of that 10% chunk comes from that ability. But yeah, everything else is Elixir, entirely LiveView. And yeah, we have just a little bit of CSS. We write it a lot of Tailwind though, so I'm sure that's not quite counted. That might be counted as HTML according to GitHub standard, but the class names. And then, yeah, tiny bit of Rust for font parsing to be able to then put onto the video editing, as I mentioned. And we use AWS for deployment and storage purposes. So why LiveView in the first place? Honestly, I was trying to come up with a slide, and the first line of the docs could not have said it better. LiveView is a process that receives events, updates its state, and renders updates to the page as a diff. For us, as I mentioned, it's very photo video based. As you can imagine, there are not a lot of things that we can do extremely synchronously, right? It's not always a user clicks a button and then something updates on the database and then you can come back to the user with an update. It's user uploads a video and then we have to wait for the video upload to finish. And then we have some more processing that we want to do ourselves. And then we can tell the user, hey, this video finished up. So because of how long that process is, it just didn't make sense to do a standard HTTP type app. Didn't make sense for us to do a standard single page application because of that knowledge of how much background processing and how long the user would have to wait between the time that they uploaded a video and the time that they could actually start to mess around with it and see what portions they want to use and that kind of thing. So looking at the available frameworks, LiveView immediately came to mind, Elixir immediately came to mind because the PubSub features were so vast in Elixir. And LiveView especially because it leverages that PubSub and makes it really easy to update the client. So in a situation where you've uploaded a video, we queue up some background jobs once it's finished uploading to our storage provider, S3. And then once it goes through the background jobs, it's very easy for us to then send an update back to LiveView saying, hey, this video is finished. Here's all the information you need. And then LiveView is like, okay, great. And then just sends the diff, right? To say, this one thing was added on this page of other videos. And it doesn't send back the entire page. We don't have to reload the page. It just updates because it's just a new, singular new video. This makes for a really seamless client experience for the users. This looks like they've uploaded a video. It shows up as processing almost immediately. And then when it's done, it just finishes up and you can actually see the video. And so performance-wise, it looks like everything happens very fast without them actually having to do anything. We have similar use cases for cases of APIs that might take a really long time to respond, where typically you might, start at your front end, make a request to your back end, which then makes a request to the external API, waits for the external API, and then responds to the front end again. That round trip time, there's only so much you can control, right? You can't control an external API, but you can control potentially how quickly you respond between your front ends and back ends. And so in the case of LiveView, because the website connection remains open, we cut down on that time for the response. So everything that we can control in that external API's running time does end up becoming faster, which has also been great to see. So what are things that made this especially great for us? I just want to go into a little bit more detail because my entire team, we've all worked at similar stage companies before. We've all worked at larger companies, smaller companies, and have a good amount of experience with startups, and this has felt like one of the companies that we've moved fastest at. We've been able to ship things faster, and we just, couldn't help but feel like LiveView was a huge part of that. One of the biggest reasons, I kind of touched on this before, but it's been a lot easier to handle this like photo video aspect of our product. When I first joined, this was one of the parts that kind of scared me a little because I, first of all, had never worked on a product like this. A lot of the products that I had worked on previously were very strictly data-based. It was very like, almost CRM type, where it was just like information being recorded, and data based products have their own types of struggles, but the photo and video based ones, I was like, oh, what if it's too slow? How are we gonna process all of these like photos and videos? It's a lot of information, but LiveView has made it really easy to even make like a small MVP version of our app because even if you look at the docs right out of the gate, they provide a way to just upload files, right? Like page like 3 of the docs or something is a little to do that says, here's how to upload a file. Also, here's how to show the progress of it. And in fact, here's how you can upload directly to S3. So all of these examples already kind of existed for us to then build on. And so while we now have our own custom solution for what is in the docs, we were able to use that both as like a template and also just to get stuff off the ground at first. So yeah, the big one was just the ease of like file uploading and different UI things that we thought were going to be a problem just didn't feel as much of a big deal as it ended up being. And to go along with that, neither was showing the different state of it. Because of LiveView's change tracking abilities and listening to both the client and the server, we were able to show the user the difference between their upload being in processing versus done or erroring, without having to start up and figure out our own pub subsystem, because Elixir and LiveView just come out of the box with it. The other piece is that the performance ended up being pretty quick because of that. I did touch on this a little bit, but yeah, the perceived performance, as in what the user thinks the performance is, ends up being pretty good because we're able to update them like this pretty much every step of the way. But Elixir is pretty fast at things also. So our post-processing, our post-video upload processing is actually pretty fast just due to how lightweight Elixir is. So there is some level of actual performance being quickly done. So the other thing is some other built-in features were the client hooks. As I mentioned, we do have a bit of JavaScript because of the whole photo and video editing piece. And it was surprisingly easy to provide a door to the JavaScript without it feeling like an afterthought. Our JavaScript can be as communicative as our live views are. So while we do try to avoid putting in client hooks where we can, LiveView makes it really easy to compartmentalize that JavaScript code and just create like a function or a class that has that appropriately communicates with the LiveView on different things, and then can just send updates. So if we finish up something in JavaScript, we can send a message to the LiveView that says, hey, this is done, or this is in this state, or something like that. And the LiveView takes the message and updates. So reacting to the JavaScript events has made our job a lot easier with all of those little pieces that we kind of have to do in JavaScript, and has also made for a much better user experience. The other one I wanted to get into is testing. So when I joined back in September, we didn't have as much of a focus on testing, but that was something that I personally wanted to try to get into and figure out. I was intrigued by the thought of being able to kind of do these integration tests, which was something that we hadn't really had the luxury of doing before. Even in a mono repo, you don't quite get the level of integration tests that you want, and definitely not as you split out into microservices. And after coming from a company that was definitely a big microservices shop, I was just like really intrigued to know how integration testing would work. And I remember the first few times I tried to write tests for the live views, I would like go into the docs and I got kind of worried because it didn't feel robust. I was like, there aren't pages and pages of documentation. It's just a couple of pages. And I was like, is this going to cover it? It didn't seem like there were a lot of people testing that much, even when I like tried to Google stuff. So it had me worried for a few minutes. But when I actually tried to write the tests, as it turned out, the pages that were available were all that I needed because it was just so simple to write those tests. I came from a React shop, so I was able to quickly see like the similarities between React testing library and LiveView test. In a similar fashion, if you've ever used either before, it does let you interact with a page via like clicks or changes to inputs. And so you can test pretty much every user interaction. So everything from a button click opening up a modal, all the way down to changing fields to make changes that then save to the database. It's all testable, which has been really great for us. It's made for some really good code coverage and means that we have a lot of live views where we can basically test every single user interaction that we do completely end to end. And this has made it a lot easier and safer to refactor. So I've been working on a big project for a few months, and in the process, you know, it's a startup, requirements change, things get added, things get removed. This like thing starts going a direction that you didn't realize you needed to go in. And so in between all of that, we try to like clean up after ourselves as much as we can. So I've rewritten, I remember this one particular live view, I've like rewritten portions of it like a few times at this point. But because I had tests that were so robust and did cover every single user interaction, that like mental safety around it was so much easier to handle. I was like, okay, regardless, this live view test has my back. If I do something like silly or I know that the test is not going to pass, so it will be okay. And that's been a pretty huge comfort, especially for a company at our stage where, honestly, this is, I think, the first time I've worked at a company this small where we actually had robust tests. So LiveView, yeah, has just made it so much easier for us to actually write them. And finally, our engineering processes are pretty streamlined, it feels like. We don't have to worry about splitting up cards based on front end or back end, which is something that we've had to do in the past and made sense in the past. We work in a very Kanban style because we have not too many people. It's also our preferred way of working over Agile. Yeah, but when we split into Jira cards, it's all like slices of features instead of, okay, we'll do this thing on the UI and then go into our backend and do this other piece. And doing it in slices as we're going to write this entire feature at once has been nice for code review and testing, especially. In code review, it's a lot easier to see, oh, okay, you've added this button that does this thing. And then in the live view, you've added a corresponding handle event that handles whatever the button's doing and then updates the database or sends off this other thing. And so it's a lot easier to wrap your mind around those kinds of changes, especially because, the code base is still really small. So we all are pretty familiar with all parts of the code. And so it makes the code reviews a lot more seamless. And then testing is also a lot easier. We have, I mentioned a manual QA, and they can test the features end to end versus, we're gonna have to test the backend with Postman, or we'll just have to test the components of the UI first. Everything is all completely end to end so that when we actually get around to merging our PRs, we ship the whole feature, which feels pretty good. So some drawbacks of LiveView, I do want to get into how maybe it occasionally hasn't worked as well for us, or some road bumps we've hit, and just talk about that for a little bit. I did mention we can ship features in pretty big chunks, and sometimes we do, which means that PRs can get kind of large. We try to be pretty cognizant of it, but it's not uncommon for us to have PRs that are touching like 500 line or 500 line change mark because of this. Some of it can be boilerplate. LiveView does add kind of, I don't want to say like extra lines, but because for every new page we add, we have to add all of the LiveView setup stuff. We end up with a few extra lines here or there every single time we have to add an entirely new page. But yeah, because of the fact that it's very easy to add just whole features at a time, these PRs can get big. So we're trying to be a lot more cognizant of how big they get and making sure we're not putting in too much of a feature at once because of how easy it is to just like accidentally add on. The other one is that the patterns aren't quite as well established as they are in other frameworks, as in I and a few others had come from a Ruby on Rails background where the patterns are really established for a lot of things. There are a lot of people with a lot of opinions on how to write Ruby on Rails or how to even like deal with the standard like MVC architecture. And it's not as established for Elixir. But on a personal note, that's actually been kind of cool. That means that we've been able to kind of just come up with or like identify a problem that we're seeing in our code. So for example, a few months ago, we realized that we were starting to reuse our UI components. So like basically just like Keats templated code. We wanted to start reusing them across many different live views because we have features that are consistent across different pages. And we had started out just like kind of copy and pasting, but every time it needed to be changed, we ended up changing it in multiple different places. So we started reusing the UI components. But when you reuse the UI components, you also have to reuse the events that come with it. So if you have event attached to a button or something, you have to reuse that as well, which means that now we had the same handle event code on many different pages. And so we were like, okay, now how do we eliminate that portion? And so we had come up with a way to essentially write the handle events all in one module and then share that module across different live views in sort of safe way. How do we make sure that this live view should actually be using this handle event? What if this live view needs a custom handle event? So we've been able to kind of come up with these patterns and just try to see if it works, basically. Like we put it in and then we use it for a few months and kind of check in here and there, like, oh, I saw that you recently used this pattern. Like, how is that working for you? And kind of adjust or add to it based on feedback from the other engineers. So while maybe not as straightforward patterns wise, it's been pretty cool to be able to, just kind of test things out and just see how it works. Third, hiring has been interesting. We essentially have to look at a pool of people who are willing to work only in Elixir because we only have our LiveView repo, right? It's like front end's LiveView, back end's LiveView. So now we're like trying to find UI engineers who are also willing to work in Elixir. And so that has been interesting. We've been lucky enough to hire some really, really great people, but as we grow, it's something that'll be top of mind as to how we approach hiring. Not to mention something that's I'm personally interested in is making sure that we hire juniors and are able to mentor younger developers. But there's not a lot of resources out the gate for how to teach functional programming to people who are new at coding. I didn't learn too much about functional programming until I was like, 4 years past a degree program and 3 years into my career. So, and that was the case for a lot of us. And so trying to teach somebody who doesn't have a lot of coding experience how to do functional programming is something that I haven't seen a lot of resources for personally. We've looked and some of them are good, but it's like your mileage may vary kind of situation in terms of the variety of avenues available to learn. So that's something that I'm anticipating some difficulty in. Definitely something that we're up to the challenge, but yeah, that's it'll be interesting to see how we cross that bridge when we get there. And finally, we're going to have some difficulty reusing any part of this for a mobile app. There is LiveView native. I learned about it at this conference, but we don't have a lot of reusable JavaScript or an API backend that you would theoretically be able to reuse for a mobile app. So if we wanted to build a native or mobile desktop app, we might have to rework parts of it. We might end up using LiveView native. But yeah, that's also something that cross that bridge when we get there, but it could be difficult. But yeah, that's about it. That's all I had to share. Thank you for listening. It's been really great working with LiveView so far. I've been really pleased with it. Most of my team has. And it's been so helpful for our use case with our product. And the drawbacks are there, but we've overall been able to mitigate or handle them as they came. So yeah, thank you for listening.
All right, thank you for your talk. So looking at the Q&A at Huba, I don't see any questions at the moment. If you do, like the audience in the room or at home, if you have questions, please use the Huba app to post those questions. In the meantime, I'm kind of curious. You already touched a little bit about hiring. Do you think the decision to use LiveView has made it more difficult for you to do hiring, or how has it in general changed your hiring perspective?
There's a kind of component where we end up having to convince some people that we are using LiveView and that it's okay, basically, especially our UI engineers. That first UI engineer hire, that was his biggest concern. He was like, I don't know Elixir, this isn't React, like what do I do? And I think, our UI engineers, they're great. And they've kind of looked at it as more of a challenge, like this is a way to grow. They won't necessarily be doing just UI work anymore because the lines are blurred between front end and back end. So while there is a little bit of apprehensiveness, I think we've been lucky enough to find people who are curious more than anything. And so finding that curiosity, I think, is what we look for in teammates. And so has lent itself well to actually hiring them. But yeah, it is something that needs to be addressed in the process because it can be kind of scary working in a framework that's not that old and not many people know about it. So.
All right, thank you. And for the people that did make the transition, do you think, besides you mentioned already the kind of the lack of resources like learning materials, but do you think what was actually hard for people to transition to LiveView?
Yeah, I think for most of us, there's not been too much difficulty as far as making the switch over to LiveView. We've adjusted pretty well. I think the thing that usually trips people up from what I've seen so far is where to draw the line of how to organize code, as in like, what is something that stays in Heeks templates versus what is something that you should do in a LiveView versus what is something that you should go ahead and keep in a schema or a different module. Because everything is so, it can feel so like it's all like one thing. It's hard to understand code organization at first, which is something that, we work on as a team as far as like what the team standards are, but, we're still all kind of new at this. So we're kind of all figuring it out together.
Yeah, I think it's both a plus and a disadvantage of Phoenix that it doesn't have those strong conventions like other languages, maybe.
Yeah.
I see one question coming in through Huba. A question, have you considered something like Ash for building out the API part and maybe sharing code with your future mobile app?
Yes, we have considered Ash as an API thing. We started looking into it when we realized a mobile app might be in the horizon. And I think we liked the general capabilities that Ash had. It just hasn't necessarily been necessary to implement quite yet, but it is on our radar. Yeah.